Hi campers, welcome to YCamp. It's Marissa and we're filming here again today at YMCA Cedar Glen Outdoor Center located in Schaumburg, Ontario. Today I have a bit of a natural arts and crafts planned for you, and we're actually going to do it inside because you need lots of different parts, and I tried to film outside but things were just blowing everywhere. So we've moved to an indoor location. We are going to be making wildflower seed pods today, which will look like this, or it could look different depending on how you choose to make yours. But this is what we'll be making. This is a little biodegradable pod, essentially, that has wildflower seeds in it. So once you have these ready to go, you could plant them or drop them in a park, and you could have some wildflowers growing up from that. Before we get started, I'd just like to take a moment to do our land acknowledgement here at Cedar Glen. We recognize that YMCA Cedar Glen is situated on the traditional territories of the Indigenous peoples that lived and still live around the Great Lakes Basin. This parcel of land was part of European Treaty Number 13, also known as the Toronto Purchase. We recognize it also under the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Treaty, which was created by distinct Indigenous nations living around the Great Lakes to peaceably share and care for the land and its resources. Before we get started with our craft activity, I just wanted to do a little Never Can Tell with you. So if you watched my last video, the nature maps video, you'll remember we did the green glass room Never Can Tell. Today I have one about the moon. So I'll show you how it works. And remember, in order to become part of the Never Can Tell Club, you have to figure out the trick or the secret to what I'm doing and be able to do it the same way. Then you're part of the Never Can Tell Club, and you can try and help get some of your friends or family members to join the club with you. So this Never Can Tell is actually pretty simple. It's called the moon. All you have to do to be part of the Never Can Tell Club is exactly this. The moon has two eyes, a nose, and a mouth. I'll do that again for you. The moon has two eyes, a nose, and a mouth. So in order to join me in the Never Can Tell Club, you have to do exactly that back to somebody who's watching to prove that you're part of the club. But you have to figure out the trick. There is a trick to it, and I'll tell you at the end. But you can think about that while we talk about our craft. So I wanted to do a craft that had to do with wildflowers. You can see I've picked some wildflowers from our beautiful camp location here because wildflowers are so important to our ecosystem and to our environment. And the reason that they're so important is that pollinators, honeybees and insects and other things like that, rely on the flowers to have food to eat, and then they produce honey for us as well, if they're honeybees, for example. Also, pollinators like insects and bees and things like that help us continue to have healthy plants and healthy crops. So wildflowers are actually a really important part of our ecosystem beyond just being really beautiful. So when we're making these wildflower seed pods, we'll be using recycled materials, so recycled paper. We'll be putting wildflower seeds in here, and then once they're dry, like this one is right here, you'll be able to spread them around your neighborhood or even plant them in your garden, and they should grow some beautiful wildflowers for you, which will attract pollinators, which will be healthy for your local environment. In order to participate along today, there is a few things that you do need. The first is going to be a source of recycled paper. So I'm going to use for our video today some newspaper that I was going to put in my recycle bin anyway. To make these ones right here, I used some construction paper that I had already used and drawn on at home, and I was going to recycle it anyway. So I saved it from the recycle bin and used it to make some seed pods. So that's the most important thing. You'll need a measuring cup with a little bit of water in it. I'll tell you exactly how much after. You will need either a muffin tin. I have a mini muffin tin. You could use a big one. It doesn't really matter, whatever you have. So a muffin tin is really helpful to have, as well as, or you could use a cookie cutter too. I'll show you that option as well. The only other mandatory thing you'll need is some wildflower seeds. So I just went to my local garden center and I bought a packet of local wildflower seeds, which are just in this little bowl here to be put into the pods. But if you can't get to the garden center or you're not sure you want to do that, you can also just collect some seeds from your neighborhood. So one really easy way to do that would be to find some dandelion puffs. You know, after the yellow flower dies, you get those white puffs and you can blow on them. Those little things that float in the air when you blow on it, those are actually the seeds of a dandelion. So you could collect some of those and use that as a wildflower seed. And although we often think of dandelion as a weed, because it might grow in places where we don't want it to, it's actually a really important source of food for insects and pollinators. It's usually one of the first things that pops up in the spring as well. Another thing I was thinking you could do is if you could find, if it's a bit later in the summer when you're watching this, you might be able to find some milkweed. And milkweed, similar to a dandelion, gets those white fluffs and those seeds just sort of float on the breeze. But if you could find some of those and put them in your seed pods, that would be amazing, because milkweed is very, very important for monarch butterflies. As they travel all the way from Mexico up to Canada, they rely on milkweed plants to provide them with food, and it's where they lay their eggs, and it's what their caterpillars eat as well. So there's some different options for you in regards to finding wild flower seeds. If you do buy seeds, you'll want to make sure you buy local seeds. You don't want to be planting invasive species or plants that are not local to your neighborhood. So make sure you check with your garden center. They should be able to help you out. Okay, so let's get started with making our wildflower seed pods. So the first thing you'll want to do is get an adult's help, because you're going to have to use either a food processor or a blender. I have this nice little sort of portable food processor here. And what you want to do is, in the bowl of your food processor, you want to rip up your paper pieces into little squares, just like this. I just did it by hand. You could use scissors too if you wanted to. But what you want is about 2 cups of torn up paper shreds in your food processor. And then you'll take about a 1/4 cup of water and pour it in there. You'll have to experiment a bit. I found that with my little mini food processor here that a 1/4 cup of water just wasn't quite enough to shred up the paper, so I added a bit more. It does mean that my paper, when it comes out, is really wet, but I'll show you how to deal with that. Another thing that might be an idea, I didn't find it as much with the newspaper, but when I used construction paper before, which is really thick, almost like cardstock, I actually found that if I soaked the paper first, let it sit in the water for a bit, it was much easier to blend it or food process it up. So once you have that ready to go, you're just gonna use your food processor. Now remember, that's a great kitchen tool, but it can be a dangerous one. So get an adult to help you. So once the water and the torn up paper are in there, you'll just blitz it up until it forms almost like a clumpy sort of clay-like paste. I'll show you what that looks like. So here is my newspaper all shredded up. So you can see it's kind of like clumpy, it's wet, it actually feels kind of cool. So if you have, like me, a couple big pieces, for example, that got stuck against the side of the food processor, you can just tear them up with your hands. Once it's kind of mulched up, it really sticks together quite well. So this is the point where you can be creative and take things in a couple different directions. So if you wanted to, you could add a couple drops of food coloring to your mix to give it a nice vibrant color. You might not want to handle it with your bare hands if you put food coloring in, because it's likely going to dye your skin. So just think about that. And something I wanted to do today was to make my seed pods look really beautiful. When I was out collecting these lovely flowers, I also gathered just some petals and leaves and other parts of flowers that I thought were bright and colorful. So I'm actually going to dump those into my mixture. I'm putting them in after I blended it because I kind of want to see them, but you could also put them in before and see what that looked like if they got blended up with the mixture. You might get some cool natural colors and natural dyes. So that's some different things to experiment there with. Whatever you put in this bowl with your shredded up paper, make sure it's recyclable or biodegradable, because it's going to become part of the environment. So you wouldn't want to put in like glitter or plastics or anything like that, because those won't break down naturally in the environment, okay? So once that's in, I'm then going to add some seeds. You might be tempted to add a lot of seeds, but if you do, the plant will be really crowded when it grows. So you probably just want to add just a small pinch of seeds into your mixture here. I'll do a few pinches because I'm going to make quite a few seed pods. So you can mix them in right now, or you can do it as you're forming each of the individual seed pods. You do want to make sure that you put the seeds in after you blend, because otherwise you might break up the seeds and then they won't be able to grow. Okay? So you could use a spoon to stir, but I'm going to just use my hands because I think it feels cool. So I'm just going to mix up this mixture, get all the seeds worked in there. I think I could use maybe a few more seeds. So I'll just dump them in and mix it all together. Kind of a fun thing to do. Feels almost like paper mache if you've ever done that before. It's looking really beautiful with all these little flower parts in it. So I'll try and show you what it looks like. So there's my mixture all in there. Still kind of crumbly and loose. So now it's time to start forming it. So like I said, you could use, I'm going to use my little mini muffin tin, which is what I used for these as well. And I'm also going to use, I'll show you how you could do it with a cookie cutter. Okay, so remember I said I put in a bunch of extra water. Now's the time to take that out. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab about as much as I think can fit into one of the muffin cups right here. And I'm actually, I have an extra bowl. I'll put it so you can see it, and I'm just gonna, look at that. I'm just gonna squeeze out any of the extra water. Might use my other hand because it's a bit stronger. And you'll see that it starts to clump together. See that? So then, I'm just gonna take it and put it into one of the holes of the muffin pan and pack it down. That's all there is to it. And so when I look at that, I can see the seeds in there. I can see the colorful flower parts that I put in. I'll do one more for you. You don't want to make them too thick. I wouldn't suggest filling the muffin tin all the way to the top because you want these to dry out so you can hold on to them or store them. And if it's really thick and really wet, that would be hard to do. So squeeze it as hard as I can until almost all the water's out. And then same thing, I'm just gonna push it into my muffin tin. So once you get all of your seed pods done, you will want to let them sit in the muffin tin a bit to dry. I'll talk about that after, but first let's do one with a cookie cutter, and I'll show you what that might look like. So it's gonna start the same. Take a handful of my seed pod mixture and give it a really good squeeze out. Ooh, there's lots of water in that one. It's a fun activity to get your hands dirty with. Okay, and then if I have a cookie cutter, I would just put it on a flat surface. I'm gonna make a bit of a mess of my table, but that's okay, I can clean it up after. And I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna pack it into the bottom of that cookie cutter, into the shape, and I have a flower shaped cookie cutter, so that's kind of fun because we're making wildflower seed pods. I might need a little more. Give it a squeeze over my bowl. Sprinkle it in, and you really wanna pack that down. Use your fingers to squish it in so it's nice and hard. Then with the cookie cutter, I would suggest if you have a cooling rack, a baking cooling rack just like this one, it would be great. If not, a cookie sheet would work or your countertop. You just want to gently pop it out and let it sit there to dry, and you can use the cookie shape again. I can't pick it up because it's still so wet, but I've got a lovely seed pod there that's about the shape of the cookie cutter that I used. Once you have all your seed pods made in your muffin tin, or if you've used a cookie cutter on your drying rack, you'll want to put them somewhere warm, maybe in the sun where they can dry for a few hours. It does take them almost 24 hours to dry all the way. So once they're hard enough that you feel like maybe after a couple hours you could pop them out of the muffin tin, you'll want to do that and then place them on the drying rack or your countertop or a cookie sheet to help speed up the drying process. So that's how you make wildflower seed pods that you can plant around your neighborhood or even in your own yard to attract insects and pollinators, an important part of our ecosystem. If you want to work towards your virtual camp certification, make sure that you reach out to us at ymcahome.ca/YCamp and tell us how you did today with the wildflower seed pod activity. Before we sign off, I do want to make sure I go over the Never Can Tell with you that we started at the beginning. So if you remember, it went like this. The moon has 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. One more time. The moon has 2 eyes, a nose, and a mouth. When I do this one with most campers, they think it's something about how I've drawn the circle clockwise or counterclockwise. That's not the hint. They think it's to do with the fact that I did the eyes and then the nose and then the mouth. That's not the hint. You can do those any way you want. The way to get into the Never Can Tell Club is to do it with your left hand. So most people are right-handed, so they'll automatically start drawing the moon with their right hand because that's their dominant hand. But the trick to this Never Can Tell is to do it with your left hand. So we hope you figured that out. But if not, now you know, and you can see if you can initiate some other people into your Never Can Tell Club. If you are enjoying YCamp, be sure to subscribe online and please consider making a small donation to support your local YMCA summer camp this year. Come join us next week for our last installment of the Natural Arts and Crafts videos. We're going to be making homemade chia pets, which is really fun. I have some samples growing at home right now in my kitchen, and I can't wait to share them with you. We hope you have an awesome day and can't wait to see you again next time on YCamp. Thanks, everyone.